right, let's see who accepts it. Twitch has accepted the stream. YouTube has accepted the stream. Facebook has accepted the stream. Are you ready to start your show?
We just have like 30 seconds of complete silence before we start.
After the timer or before the timer?
Before.
Sure. So put your hand up when you want me to start the timer.
Okay. How about I click?
Yeah.
All right. I'll click. Well, yeah.
When I hear the click, I'll start the timer.
Okay. Hello, Think Twice Radio, and welcome to another episode of the Metachewy podcast. I'm Metachewy, and it's just me today, so welcome to my show. So in today's show, I'm going to cover a couple different topics. The main focus is going to be the Kensington Expressway. There's been some updates, so I want to record my first kind of full kind of zoomed out presentation of the Kensington, going back all the way to the founding of the city, up to today and the future, and kind of giving as objectively as I can a presentation about the Kensington Expressway project. And then so that's going to be the first part of the show, and kind of uninterrupted, me just recording that. And then I'm going to cover a couple different topics, hopefully, if we have time. So about abolishing the bit license, which is New York State's uniquely oppressive cryptocurrency regulations. Then I'm going to talk about some Buffalo Bills and specifically Josh Allen and a concussion issue in professional sports. So, and a couple other topics. But first, let's get into the Kensington Expressway. So, yeah, thank you, Nick's World. I see we have a comment. Yeah, I think next week John and I will be recording, but for now I'm just going to, SAGWA is a topic of our coverage, but in this show I'm just going to talk kind of uninterrupted for as long as I need to talk about the Kensington Expressway. But yeah, drop a comment, and I can see it, and when I'm done with my presentation, I'll circle back. So thanks for tuning in. So the Kensington Expressway project. So this is my Kensington Expressway address, or the Kensington Address, and I really want to, obviously, for those of you who know me or don't know me, I have a position, right? I'm very pro filling in and restoring the Humboldt Expressway project, but I'm going to do my best to, as objectively as I can, present the entire scope of the project, a little bit about the past of the Kensington, the current situation as I see it, and then also some questions for the future. So I'm going to try to be as objective as I can, but just keep in mind that I am biased, as I am anti the Kensington Expressway project and want them to fill it in. So first, I want to talk about the Kensington Expressway project. I want to talk a little bit about the past, right? I think to fully understand the Kensington Expressway, and just to be clear, when I say the Kensington Expressway project, this is the New York State Department of Transportation's project on the Kensington Expressway in the city of Buffalo. Right now, they are in the process of well, essentially, I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary, but is the most expensive transportation infrastructure project on planet Earth when you boil it down to cost per linear foot. So as of now, the New York State Department of Transportation plans to build a 3/4 mile long tunnel called the Kensington Expressway at a cost of over $1 billion. So very expensive for a very small stretch of project, and it's situated on the city's east side of Buffalo. And really, this was all started through a Reconnecting Communities grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation, with the goal of reconnecting the east side. So we'll get a little bit into that, but that's kind of the high-level overview of the project. So first, I think it's important to understand the past, right? How we got to where we are today. So really the first thing that we have to understand is Frederick Law Olmsted and the city of Buffalo. So who's Frederick Law Olmsted? So Frederick Law Olmsted is one of the most famous landscape architects. He is most famous for designing Central Park in New York City, which is globally famous for anyone that's visited New York City. Central Park is, it's really a park in the middle of the city that is, world renowned and is really, as big of a metropolitan as New York City is, having this massive park in the middle. So this was the architect that actually designed Central Park in New York City, but it's lesser known that he was responsible for designing the city of Buffalo's, the street system, the park system. And when it was created, he said that the city of Buffalo was the best planned city in the world. Which you look at a city map, it might sound ridiculous, but the city of Buffalo is unique and it has a kind of a radial street pattern. So Niagara Square, which is kind of almost the hub of the city. It's where the city of Buffalo's City Hall is located, and it was really designed to be like the central civic area. And then from Niagara Square, you have radial streets such as Elmwood, Delaware, Genesee, Broadway, Clinton that kind of radiate outwards. And he said it was the best planned city in the world because he designed the park system for the city of Buffalo. And his really goal and what he did with his plan was to try to create a city within a park. He didn't want a park within a city, but a city within a park. So his plan had parkways throughout the city, and he wanted any resident in the city to have easy access to nature and to green space. So he wanted it so that any resident in the city could walk outside their door and have easy access to a park. So he really had, I think he called it an emerald necklace around the city. So really there's Delaware Park, which is, the largest park in the city. And then you had Humboldt Park, I think it was called at the time, which is now Martin Luther King Park on the east side. And then a park on the waterfront. And he designed parkways that connected these three major parks. And at the time, especially when you look at kind of European cities that were just kind of cobbled together over time, so none of the streets make sense. There's no blocks. It just kind of evolved over time. Buffalo in America especially had the unique opportunity of kind of providing a blank slate to city planners. And Olmsted, at this time, the city was very small, and he was really able to design kind of a city from scratch, which is unique, especially when you compare it to European cities. So this is our heritage of Buffalo. At one point was considered the best planned city in the world. It had a world-class park and parkway system on par with Central Park. So that was kind of our legacy, and that was the design of being the best planned city in the world. You had just had parks all throughout the city, and really it was intended that, again, Buffalo would be a city within a park, and not the other way around. So it's also important to understand Humboldt Parkway. So Humboldt Parkway was the parkway that Olmsted designed that connected Delaware Park to Martin Luther King Park. And it was this grand parkway with large, massive trees. And I think for those that live in the city, especially on the west side, people are very familiar with Bidwell Park, right? The kind of the strip of a parkwell in Chapman Parkway, which is on the city's west side. This area of the city, which city residents are familiar with, is always hosting, events, farmers markets, picnics, outdoor activities that residents can hand. But it's important to know that Humboldt Parkway was actually much bigger than Bidwell Parkway. So there was this parkway that was actually bigger than the current Bidwell Parkway and Chapman Parkway on the city's east side, and connected Delaware Park to Martin Luther King Park. And it was this really extravagant parkway with large trees, and it was really the main parkway in the system, connecting the two major parks of Olmsted's city within a park design. And it's important to understand that this parkway, which was a large parkway, is no longer present. So in the 1950s and 1960s, at this point, the attitude in urban planning and American life was, all about the cars. How do we build cities for the cars? How do we build it for the commuter class? So at this point, there's a lot of planners like Robert Moses, and the general thought of what progress was at that time was classified as making it as convenient as possible for every American to own a car so they could get around in their car from the cities to the suburbs. And in Buffalo, the easiest way to get commuters, and at this point too, working class, right? To get people from the city into the suburbs and vice versa, in and out. What better way to build a highway than by cutting down trees and using this parkway system that was already there, this clear path, instead of having to, eminent domain and destroy buildings, you could just turn this parkway into a highway. So as part of the 50s and 60s, the state actually came in and destroyed Humboldt Parkway. They cut down trees and they filled it in to build a highway, the Kensington Expressway, which we know today. So this major parkway, at this point, it was framed in the 50s, 60s as, progress versus horse and buggy thinking. So it's important to know, too, that not everyone was on board with this vision. You had hearings in the Common Council chambers and lots of citizens that spoke up and say, this is not the right thing to do. This is a tragedy in the making. And I think at the time in the 50s and 60s where we were building American cities and the city of Buffalo for cars and commuters, I think with the retrospect, right, hindsight's 2020, but I think a lot of city residents would say that this was a great tragedy to actually lose this world-class parkway, world-class trees, and just a great overall park in the name of progress, which at that time was the automobile. So that's a little bit about the history of the Kensington Expressway. And it's also important to note that there has been community groups that have been fighting for and advocating for the return of the Humboldt Parkway system. So there's a group called the ROC, or ROCC, Restore Our Community Coalition. And this is a group of East Side residents that have met. I think it was at Headley Parkway or the part of the Hamlin Park neighborhood. But you had residents that had been fighting for decades now for the full restoration of the Humboldt Parkway. So I think when we think about the current moment of advocating for the controversy, is really important. And I think everyone involved on groups like the East Side Parkways Coalition, we do acknowledge that we really do stand on the shoulders of giants. These community advocates that were fighting, I think going back at least to the 80s, 90s, for decades now, they've been fighting for the Humboldt Expressway. And we're finally at a point, and a lot of this investment is that the state's coming in to build this new Kensington Expressway project is because of the advocacy work that laid the foundation for this money to actually come in. So I think it's important to current city residents, as someone who's a millennial on the younger side, just be aware of the history of there are community advocates that have been fighting for the full restoration or the restoration of Humboldt Parkway. And without their efforts decades ago, we really wouldn't be where we are in this position where we can advocate for the full restoration. So that's I think that's a brief overview of kind of the past of the history. So again, it's important to note the Kensington, our legacy as City of Buffalo residents is a world-class parkway system that was kind of stolen to us through the planning by the central planners of the department, New York State Department of Transportation. This was, again, a time in American history where progress was thought of as building society for the automobile. So that was kind of, I guess, each iteration, whether it's the Olmsted Parkway system or the Kensington Expressway for the automobile, this corridor has been always a reflection of kind of the current values of society at that point in time. So you went from kind of respecting nature and viewing nature as an asset in Olmsted's days to prioritizing automobile. And now we're in this current moment where we really want this project to, again, reflect our values in the current, but also looking forward how this project can impact the city. So that's a little bit about the past. So now I want to jump into the present moment. So in order to understand the present, right, having that grounding of the history of the project is important. So you can kind of get a grounding of where we are now. So I wanted to focus a little bit about the present moment. So I'm recording this in late 2024. And it's important to know kind of maybe the more recent past and kind of the current moment of where we are with the Kensington Expressway project and the state's reconnecting East Buffalo, the 33. I think the first thing to really understand the present moment is to understand that the Kensington Expressway is at the end of its useful life. So what do I mean by that? You have this expressway that was built in the 50s and 60s, and it had a useful life. It wasn't going to last forever. It was going to last for 50 years before it would need to be redone. And we have reached that point where, technically, engineering-wise, it needs to be addressed because actually the infrastructure is at the end of its useful life. And I believe that the Kensington actually reached its useful life, I think 10 or 20 years ago. So we're not just at the end of its useful life, we were at the end of being able to delay any further addressing the issue. So we're in this moment of time where, as an actual engineering infrastructure project, the Kensington Expressway needs to be addressed because it's crumbling, and money needs to come in to fix it because we can't push it down or kick the can any longer. So it's kind of the current moment of understanding something needs to be done. There's no kicking the can down. We've been kicking the can down the road for the last 10 or 20 years. And I think it's very apparent too. It's not just technically engineering wise, but any resident that lives nearby, or especially myself, I ride my bicycle quite frequently along the expressway, and just a visual common sense inspection of the Kensington shows that it's in rough shape. So there's some visible actual rust marks coming down the concrete. The actual retaining walls on the side they look like they're crumbling. They're not in good shape. They've never been painted. There's no real, it's just a very dingy project. So even just without an engineering degree, I don't have an engineering degree, but just a visual inspection shows that yes, this project, it's crumbling. It needs to be addressed because it's in very rough shape just from, an everyday observer of the project. So with that being said, right, we're at this moment in time where the state, the Department of Transportation has to do anything. There's no longer reached the end of its useful life. The project has expired. We need to do something now. And I think it was at that point State Senator Tim Kennedy, who's now the area's U.S. representative. He said, I think at a meeting that this is about a difference of vision. This is really about a vision of the future, and he couldn't be more right. We are at this moment. We are at a literal fork in the road, if I'm pun intended. We are on this fork in the road of visions, and really the two visions that we have are right now the State Department of Transportation's vision, which is the current project, the Kensington Expressway project, which I'll touch in, which involves again covering a 3/4 mile expressway with a tunnel at a cost of right now budgeted over $1 billion to reconnect to the community. So that's the current vision that the state is moving forward with at their pace. But there's also another vision, which is kind of building off Rock's vision of actual full restoration of the parkway. So really there's this, and I'll say as someone that has their feet on the ground and has a pulse of what's going on, there is this community, really, it feels like a movement at this point of groups of city residents, rich and poor, black and white, male, female, really across council district lines, along neighborhood lines, of this movement for the full restoration of the Humboldt Parkway. So again, the alternative community vision that a lot of people are pushing for on the ground is actually not just a covering of the cap, but a full restoration of the Humboldt Parkway. So actually connecting MLK Park with Delaware Park, filling in the tunnel, and going back to the original Olmsted design, which is kind of the legacy of our city. So those are kind of the two competing visions. And we're at a fork in the road, and it really is about vision. So I'm going to cover now here a little bit about those two different visions of the Kensington Expressway. So first, let's start really again with the New York State Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Authority. So we had federal officials, state officials, local officials, really our elected officials. Mayor Pete, the transportation secretary, you had our state senator, Chuck Schumer, you had our governor, really all our elected officials, all our politicians have kind of came to town. They gave the city what they called Reconnecting Communities grant. And they came to town and they really presented their vision of the future of we are going to fix the mistake the central planners that made the mistake in the first place are now coming to town and saying it was a mistake. We divided this community. We're going to fix it by reconnecting the community, which is a great idea. I think, everyone's on board with solving it, but really, I think the issue is with the actual vision of how to do that, right? So you had the New York State Department of Transportation come in with this plan for a 3/4 mile of a stretch tunnel to reconnect the neighborhood, but it doesn't really fully address the entire highway, the entire parkway system. So lots of money is flowing in, again, because the Kensington's at its useful life, money has to come in support. And really what these elected officials did is they took the Rock vision and kind of took ideas from it and spun it around to their own plan for, which is the current infrastructure project. It's really important. Like, why are they wanting to reconnect the community? And really, I think one thing that's important to kind of understand is just how segregated the city of Buffalo is. So, and Buffalo is not unique. There are this era of central planning where, state officials came in, prioritized the automobile. There's really cities all around the country. I think Rochester is one that's really progressive and actually wronging this mistake of essentially, I think St. Louis is another one, but there's infrastructure projects all over the country and cities all over the country where they built highways right in the middle of the city. And these walls, right, they're not walls, they're highways, but they actually, in fact, ended up kind of being these walls right around the city that I think I have here a picture of like a racial map of, right, this project is built right in the middle of what is right now predominantly African American neighborhood, and it really by building this highway, it makes it really hard to get from one side of the city as a pedestrian. So really, what you had, not just in Buffalo, I mean, Buffalo is unique in that how segregated it is, but also around the country, you have all these infrastructure projects, highways built around the city where they ended up segregating the American city. So again, it kind of makes sense. I don't know if this was the original intent of the planners, but end up right by creating a class of people that could get in and out of the city so they could enjoy the benefits of the city but live in the suburbs, but making that commute very easy. This was, again, with the history of redlining where bankers gave out loans to certain people based on their color, based on the race in certain neighborhoods. Really, we face the situation in the city of Buffalo where we're extremely segregated, and this Kensington Expressway is it is dividing the city. I like to say it's the Berlin Wall of Buffalo, right? It's not an actual wall, right? It's a trench in the ground, but it more or less does act as type of a Berlin Wall where it divides the east side of the city from the west side of the city. And really, that's kind of the goal, right? The goal of this reconnecting community grants, which is noble. And I think everyone involved realizes it's the right thing to do, is we need to connect our communities. We need to really tear down these walls and make it easy for make it easy to have a city that's one city, not divided between east and west by an infrastructure project. So I think the goal of the project, I mean, reconnecting communities, it's what everyone agrees we need to do. It's just the trouble goes into how we actually accomplish that goal. So that's important to know. So again, here's a kind of a rendering of the state project. So really, it's a 3/4 mile tunnel which runs from around the Buffalo Science Museum all the way to Sydney Street. So it's a 3/4 mile tunnel that is going to connect that section of the city. But again, it doesn't address the full Humboldt. So you may be asking, I think a lot of citizens ask, why is it only 3/4 miles long? Why doesn't it go any further? Why don't they cover the whole Humboldt Parkway and reconnect the parks? That seems like a pretty, if you wanted to reconnect the city, why wouldn't you do the whole thing? Why stop where it stops? And that question is a good question. I think, why doesn't it go the way? And really, it's my belief, and I think a lot of people's belief, that the reason that it stops where it does is because of a thing called the Scajaquada Drain. So the Scajaquada Drain, what is the Scajaquada Drain? So this is not something that I knew about, and I don't think a lot of city residents are fully aware of. But the city, there's actually a river buried under the city. So it's called the Scajaquada Drain, which is really a network of pipes and a drainage system to actually funnel the Scajaquada Creek watershed. So back in the day, I think the Scajaquada Creek, there's lots of pollution and people were dumping things in it. And really they thought at the time, okay, the best way to address this issue is to bury the creek. So they actually had a construction project where they, dug up a part of the city and they put a drain in to actually have this Scajaquada watershed drain underneath the city. So there's actually buried under the east side of the city, and really there's this network going out to the Scajaquada watershed, and it cuts across the city, particularly on this project under Florida Street. So right by where the city's Kensington Expressway project, or the state Kensington Expressway project, stops. The reason it doesn't go any further is actually because of the Scajaquada Drain. So right, if you wanted to build this tunnel all the way out, building a tunnel on top of a river that's covered with cars, I guess is possible. And I think that's one of the reasons that the community is so opposed is the state has now promised, future phases, we're going to study future phases to connect the full parkway eventually. We're studying it, but we're going to get this project started. And I think the pushback is, no, study this now before a shovel goes in the ground, before we start building the Kensington Expressway. We need to figure out now, right, before we put a shovel in the ground, how do we get to Humboldt? If that's the ultimate goal, or how do we get to Delaware Park? How do we connect the full Humboldt Expressway? Because without studying that, the Skagit drain, it presents a major technical issue from an engineering side of how do you build a covered highway over a drained river, but also financial, right? The cost of that to actually engineer something like that is, before we put a shovel in the ground, we should be very clear of how, the full phase. How do we actually get there instead of the current project now, which is we're going to cover this 3/4 mile stretch now. And then as we go, we're going to study future phases. And the problem is if we don't study it now and have a full understanding of how we actually do that technically, we could actually be incurring costs down the road than if we knew it right now. So I think it's interesting too, right? There's some website I was completely unaware that the Skagit drain was a thing, as someone that wasn't around there. But yeah, we have a creek, a waterway buried under our city, right where this Kensington Expressway is. So it's kind of ridiculous in your, I think, right, if you could be objectively an alien, kind of looking at the civilization and say there was no people, context, you could look at the city and be like, wait, why is there a river buried, under a highway where they're driving cars? It doesn't really make any sense. And I think, it's a thing that is, presents a major issue and for future expansion. So future expansions, the Skagit drain, the problem, how to build a covered highway over the Skagit drain is a problem that has not been solved. And from some engineers I've spoken to, they're very skeptical that that might even be possible, especially cost. When you think of the cost of construction is only going up with inflation, and yeah, it's a daunting challenge, and we should know that. But yeah, it's something that's technically the reason of why the project stops. Why it stops is because given the current tunnel plan, you can't actually build that at scale and at cost in the Skagit drain. It's easier just to stop it there than to actually continue the tunnel on. So it's just something to be aware of that not many people know. And again, this tunnel, it cuts across the entire city, but right where this project is Florida Street where it kind of cuts over. So another thing to understand with this Kensington Expressway, and especially the current moment, there's lots of lawsuits going on, but the State Department of Transportation, they didn't conduct a full environmental impacts statement, so they conducted what's called an environmental assessment, or an EA. And this is kind of a lighter version of an environmental impact statement. And one of the lawsuits, there's a couple of lawsuits going on that I'll touch on a bit, but they're actually suing because they're saying, right, the state studied this project and they said, we know it's $1 billion investment, a 3/4 of a mile long tunnel. Construction will be 4 to 5 years long, but this project will have no significant impact on the environment. So if they had a finding of no significant impact, which is basically a FONSI, which is, I call it a FONSI scheme, but it's a technical term for this project doesn't demand, it will have no impact, so we don't need to do further studies of it, which is kind of at its face, getting a lot of pushback from the community. And yeah, one of the things that, the environmental impact in the FONSI, it's very technical, right? There's pages on the Kensington Expressway project. There's hundreds and hundreds of pages of engineering jargon and technical specs. I'm not an engineer, and it's too much for any one person to understand. But one of the appendixes I did want to touch on briefly was there's actually an appendix on air pollution. So the consultants that did the study of the environmental assessment, they actually studied air pollution, and particularly particulate matter, I think is a big concern. So what's particulate matter? Particulate matter is very fine particles. So they're there's two types of PM, PM10 and PM25. So PM2.5 is 2.5 microns and 10 is 10 microns, what's a micron? So PM, or particulate matter, they're really fine particles that are much smaller than even the human hair. So a human hair is 50 to 7 micrometers. A PM10 or PM2.5 are, fractions of that. So these are very fine particles. And the reason they're important is because they've actually been found, particulate matter has been found to have really bad effects on human health. And I think it's So yeah, there's an actual map where the consultants, Labella, they studied particulate matter, right? And they studied two, doing nothing and in building, kind of the impacts of that. And for example, one of the maps, the PM25, so particulate matter 2.5, the consultants actually rendering showed that if this Kensington Expressway project is built, the two terminuses of the project, so the ends, the caps, where the traffic will come in out, are actually going to create concentrated levels of particulate matter. So very concerning and that's just one little section of the report. So kind of their own report showed that it's going to create concentrated plumes or poison plumes of particulate matter at the ends of the tunnels. And as you dive deep just into the particulate matter section, right, I think it can be hard as a resident to read these reports and you're relying on experts. But just as I pushed into the PM 2.5 number, it was very concerning because the number they came up with to say that this wasn't bad is essentially they used these particulate plumes number and they just added the regional average, which was came from a particulate matter monitoring station out by the airport. So again, this location, which is the closest PM monitoring station that they had access to, they just kind of took the average from there, which so no one's actually studied the actual particulate matter right at the spots where where the project's being built. So it would be interesting to see what is the actual number of particulate matter. I mean, the consultants did their best with the data that's available. And actually, after this study was done, the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, they lowered the threshold for particulate matter at 2.5. I think it was from 12 to 9. So they modified the national air quality standards to make particulate matter, make the threshold of what's acceptable for human health even lower. And given now with that lowering of the threshold, the actual consultant's report makes it much closer to the health line. And again, it's important to know that no particulate matter is good. This is one of the many toxins in our environment as modern humans. In particular, particulate matter, right? These very fine particles that we can't see, we can't touch, but they have bad impacts. And there's lots of data out there, but a lot of the health data reflects that the actual residents that live near the Kensington Expressway, they experience higher levels of all sorts of diseases. So everything from heart disease, cancer, asthma, you can name it. And a lot of people in the community suspect that it's from breathing in the exhaust, right? Living next to a highway where you have thousands of cars every day, blowing exhaust into the environment is not good for human beings. So there's actually some evidence that strongly suggests that the location of this project has led to shorter lifespans of actual City of Buffalo residents. And that's just one little section of the report. But again, I just wanted to hammer on the point of this is just one little section that I think lots of City of Buffalo residents would like to see a further study so we fully know kind of what we're getting, what the impacts will be, instead of rushing through. So a lot of people are demanding a full environmental impact statement. And it's also important to know, too, I think, given the current, right, one of the pushbacks that the community is advocating against this is we don't need traffic, right? The city, again, coming back to Olmsted's design, we have radial street systems that, given the City of Buffalo's decrease in populations from when the project was built. So in the 50s, the highway was built for, an even more expanding city, more commuters, and that vision of an expanding city never came to fruition. The city's population is actually half of what it was when the Kensington was built for cars. And that's resulted now that people can get into and out of the city via a highway. There's no need to use radial streets. So streets like Genesee, Sycamore, Broadway, William, these streets that people could use to get out of the city, people just take the highway now. So you've kind of led to a point where actual foot traffic, so it makes it harder to have a business, right? If you have less foot traffic, less cars driving by your window, that means less customers, which means less money. So when you think about the east side of the city, which has lots of vacant parcels, lots of which are city owned, but this highway has had large impacts on the economy too, right? So you have all these people that would be customers at shops might stop on their commute at a corner store to buy milk on a corner store on William, but that customer now takes the highway in and out. So that's one thing, is the city does have street capacity on the radial arterials or the radial streets. So that's kind of a little bit about the current, I guess, project is, yeah, this 3/4 of a mile tunnel that stops where it does because of the Skagit drain. So it's kind of, so that's kind of the current proposal. And I want to talk a little about the community's vision. And I think a lot of misunderstanding about the community's vision. A lot of people say, why would you be opposed to reconnecting the community? Why would you be opposed to covering the highway? And I don't think that's fully true. I guess the critique of it from the community is not that the project is bad in vision or bad in scope, or is it a bad project. Our critique is that it's a half measure when we need a full measure, right? It's a Band-Aid on a scar. It's got the right idea, but doesn't go far enough. We want a project that goes even further. So where the current project is a 3/4 mile stretch, really the community's vision is we want that 3/4 mile stretch and we want more. We want more of it. So where the current project, is reconnected up to Sydney Street, the community vision wants to see not just a part of the Humboldt being covered, but the full Humboldt, not just being covered, but return to the original Olmsted vision. So again, reconnecting to this historic past of this world-class parkway system that really was stolen from us, from the city of Buffalo residents, by the planners and by the automobile. So the community vision really consists of, really their vision is to fill in the highway, right? To fill it in, get rid of cars, send cars down the radials, down the side streets, and plant trees and return to the original Olmsted vision of Humboldt Parkway. And there's a lot of research that says that this project, or this version, right, this filling in the highway and returning to the Olmsted vision would actually be less expensive, in addition to having, right, getting rid of particulate matter and concentrated plumes. And actually not just connecting the east side to itself, but really connecting the entire city. So really, if you built the entire Humboldt Parkway back, you could have residents on the west side that have access to Delaware Park. They could actually get on their bicycle or by foot. They could get on a path and walk all the way from Delaware Park on the west side, all the way into the heart of the east side at Martin Luther King Park. So really, that's the biggest confusion. It's not that the community is against the project because they believe it's a complete negative. The opposition is that the project is a half measure when we need a full measure. We need the full restoration, not a half restoration. So that's kind of at a high level, the vision. Again, this group which really is kind of falling under the umbrella of the East Side Parkways Coalition, but there's a lot of other people involved. It's really this movement at this point of city residents that want to see the full restoration of the Humboldt, the full connecting of Delaware Park to Martin Luther King by filling it in building a city that prioritizes the people of the city of Buffalo, not our region's commuting class, not the automobile, but actual city of residents. And the idea is that by creating this full parkway, that would truly reconnect the community and not just reconnect a part of the city. Because I think right now, stopping where it stops, that whole section from Sydney Street up to Delaware Park will remain unconnected. I know there's one neighborhood called the Trinidad Triangle, which anyone that's tried to turn from Main Street onto the Kensington or vice versa, there's this really isolated neighborhood that was a neighborhood, is a triangle, but it will continue to be disconnected from. It kind of reconnects part of the city, but not the full city or not the full neighborhood because of only 3/4 of a mile. And for really the state's vision, which has been maintaining vehicular capacity, that's the vision. So really you have a vision of really that's kind of a brief summary of the two sides of, you have really a fork in the road over vision. The Kensington needs to be addressed because it's technically at the end of its useful life. And there's really these two visions. There's this kind of the state, you can think of it as the top-down version, which is maintaining vehicular capacity, get vehicles in, get vehicles out, reconnect the community, but only 3/4 mile stretch, not the full stretch, because of the Skagit drain. And then the kind of the alternative bottom-up version of what the community really wants. The closer to the tunnel, the more people are for it, of actually the full restoration of filling in the tunnel because it will cost less, and reconnecting the entire east side from Delaware Park to Martin Luther King Park, from residents on the west side to residents on the east side, and really connecting the city and sending cars down the arterial streets. So it's kind of the past. The present, I want to pivot to the future, right? So that's kind of the current situation in the past, but I want to kind of present just really some thoughts about the future, not just of this project, but of our city as well. So the future, a couple things that could impact this right now. And as I record this, the Eastside Parkways Coalition this week and their team of lawyers submitted a injunction. So they're actually asking a court and a judge to stop the Kensington Expressway project until their lawsuits are solved or have their day in court. So there's 5 lawsuits now. So some of the things that's emerging in the future of the State Department of Transportation has a stamp to start the project, right? They had a finding of no significant impact. The federal government has approved this project to move forward, and it is starting to move forward. But one thing in the future that could come up is there's actually 5 different lawsuits at different levels from community groups, from citizens opposing the project, saying, one, you didn't follow the law. You're violating climate change legislation from New York State and infringing on people's right to clean air, for example. And then another is, that they need to do a full environmental impact statement. And there's a couple other two that I'm not aware of, but future is lawsuits, right? So that's something that we don't know how it will play out because it's the law. So we don't know kind of what the judges in the legal system, and it takes a while. But that's something emerging in the future is actual numerous lawsuits against the New York State Department of Transportation and against the Federal Highway Authority to kind of stop this project. So that's one thing that to keep our eye on in the future. The other is the mayor's race, right? So very recently we had Mayor Byron Brown, who is Buffalo's longest serving mayor. He's served for over 20 years. He announced that he's resigning midterm to accept a position as president of the Western Regional Off-Track Betting Corporation, which is a government entity that does, I believe, horse track betting. So he's stepped aside, which creates a vacuum in leadership, right? So for the next 15 months, and he said he's going to be resigning in the coming weeks. So as October 24, he'll be stepping aside, which will obviously create a vacant mayor's position. And the City of Buffalo Charter actually outlines that the council president will become acting mayor. So we have the current council president, Chris Scanlon, who will become the acting mayor. And since it's October and it's close to the election, City of residents won't get to elect a new mayor till next November. So actually 2025 will be a new mayor's race. So not only will our common council, so we'll have an acting mayor till November 2025. The South District council member, who is the current council president, will become acting mayor. And at that point, the South District, so South Buffalo, will not have a representative on the council. But one thing to keep in mind is the actual mayor's 2025 race is coming up. So I think you could easily see the Kensington Expressway project become a major lightning rod in our mayor's race in 2025. And there's been some reporting. There's, I think, up to at least a dozen names of people who are considering running for mayor. But to my knowledge, no candidate has really differentiated themselves by being pro restoration of the Humboldt Parkway. People that have been running for mayor, a lot of them are kind of insiders, whether that's from the state level or from the common council themselves, that have mostly remained silent on the issue. And I think future, you can kind of sense winds starting that this really seems like a movement. So I guess it will be interesting to hear if any of the dozen plus horses in the race for the mayor's race in 2025 actually decide to differentiate themselves by taking a hard stance of being pro full restoration. Because I believe there's a lot of voters, not just single issue voters, but a lot of City of Buffalo residents. I think it's a very popular idea to oppose the Kensington Expressway project, the toxic tunnel, whatever you call it, but no actual officials from city government have. A lot of the feedback has been that it's not a city issue because technically they're not the lead agency on it. But saying that the largest infrastructure investment in the city in a generation is not a city issue, especially when the project occurs in the city, is really it's not really true. It's more of they just don't want to have a position on it. But I think the Kensington Expressway project and the Humboldt restoration, it could very much well become a political issue in the next year. And also, I mean, these are some questions of, again, just thinking what type of city we want to build, right? So I think I touched on it briefly, but the Kensington Expressway and really this highway, it's, again, I call it the Berlin Wall of Buffalo. It is this this. It's not like technically a wall, but it's a trench in the ground, and it acts as the Berlin Wall of Buffalo. It divides the community, not just on the east side, but it divides east and west, white and black, rich and poor. It's divided our city for a generation, and this was done intentionally, right? It was done by the planners from the state Department of Transportation, and I think so. Yeah, it was bad planning, but I think one of the things I'd be optimistic about is if we had good planning, if we could divide the city, that means we can also reunite the city through good planning. So I think it's just something to be aware of. Do we, as City of Buffalo residents, want to continue to live in one of the most segregated cities of the country? Is the time is now. Now is the time to right this, what many people consider a wrong, and I think is universally wrong, of this highway divided a neighborhood, divided a community. And it's time that we fix that by, yes, reconnecting the community, but not just part of the community, reconnecting the full community. And I think nothing could reunite the city, right, between east and west, white and black, rich and poor, by connecting the full restoration of the Humboldt, not just Humboldt, but Skagit, and making it so any resident could get on Delaware Park and go to the east side to MLK and vice versa via their foot, via bicycle, via rollerblades. And I think there's this growing movement of maybe we really can, right? We're the city of good neighbors. Maybe we really could live up to that term and not only address the economic impacts that the Kensington is, but a lot of the health outcomes. So we could actually heal not just our city's economic woes and racial divisions, but actually some of the poor health outcomes that people that live close to the tunnel have. So it's kind of could be this moment of this project has divided the city for a generation, the Kensington, but I'm optimistic, and I think there's a feeling that this could be the start of really a movement of uniting the city. And I think it was, again, coming with the Berlin Wall analogy of this is the Berlin Wall of Buffalo. John F. Kennedy, our president, he went to Berlin and said, "Ich bin Berlin," or "Ich bin Berlin," which is "I am Berlin. I am a Berliner." And I think more people are saying "I'm a Buffalonian," and I think even President Ronald Reagan, when he visited the Berlin Wall right before he fell, he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And I was at the press conference where they announced their induction. I think a lot of city residents are starting to say, "Governor Hochul, fill in this trench, fill in this tunnel, fill it in." And I think this infrastructure project, right, it was this original vision of being world-class parkway that was stolen from us by the automobile and by poor planning. I think this project that's divided the community for a generation really, it feels to me like it could be the start of an actual reuniting the city, and really it could be an exciting moment of the actual people of Buffalo banding together and saying, enough is enough. We want our city back. We want our world-class parkway system back. And we're going to hold our politicians and our elected leaders feet to the fire to get what we want, because this is our city. And I think there is some momentum, and I hope, again, it's up to us, the people, to voice that. And I'm optimistic. I think there's some good energy in the air that this could be a force to unite the city of Buffalo. So that's kind of the full scope. I tried to be objective. I'm sure my bias came in from my recording, but yeah, that's kind of the past, the present, and the future. And there's more I didn't cover. There's a very complex project. Technically, engineering, legally, there's lots of issues and lots of moving parts. I did the best to kind of cover it at a very high level and be as neutral. I'm sure you could probably, I'm pro filling in the tunnels. That's my perspective, but I try to do my best of kind of giving the zoomed out, what is the project, the past, present, future, why it matters, and some of the issues. So yeah, drop some questions in the comments. If there's anything that I touched on that you didn't explain that you'd like to see me dive deeper to in future videos, I'd be glad to cover that, because this is really my first, and I don't think will be my last public comment on the Kensington Expressway project, because I'm starting to get more involved. I think it's a good use of my voice, right, and my perspective. I think, not that I feel a duty, but I think I think it's just important that I devote some of my energy and time into this project because I think it's very important to the city of Buffalo. And I think we're trying to make it a city issue. So I know the East Side Parkways, we're considering ways to make it a city issue. So I know some things I've been studying. The city code, I mean, we've been told by the Common Council I filed personally an item about particulate matter that was received and filed by the council. We recently sent a letter to the Common Council to get on their agenda, asking to speak at a meeting. We were not even put on the agenda. So really, no city official has acknowledged our group. We've been told it's not a city issue, but so we're trying to work on making it a city issue. And I think a couple of things that I've been doing some research. I mean, one, the city code, Chapter 66, air pollution, really is the city's chapter of the code, which gives the city the power to regulate the air and air pollution. And one, I'd love to see a resolution adopted by the Common Council that the city has a title called Chief Combustion Inspector. Let me say it again. The city of Buffalo has a title of Chief Combustion Inspector in the Department of Permits and Inspections, but the city code actually gives them the duty to investigate and prevent and really abate air pollution in the city. So I would love to see the city of Buffalo, and I think something we're considering is sending a letter to the council asking them to have the city's chief combustion inspector investigate particulate matter on the Kensington Expressway, specifically at the terminus of the project, and investigating on that Labella Associates graft of PM 2.5. So I think that's something very immediately, very, very easily the council do is actually adopt a resolution compelling the city's chief combustion inspector to investigate particulate matter on the Kensington Expressway. And it's funny because the city, it's very unclear who the chief combustion inspector is, but I think we found who they are. So I think that's one way. Another thing I'd love to see the city do to make a city is actually file an ordinance or adopt an ordinance to the city code, Chapter 66 air pollution around specifically particulate matter. So an ordinance is just a way it would be something that the council would adopt and then the mayor would have to approve it, but it would actually change the law of the city. So I'd love to see the council and the mayor adopt an ordinance around Chapter 66 air pollution to actually add a section of the city code to include particulate matter as a source of air pollution that's of concern. And I'd specifically like to see that code be adopted to be in line with the EPA or the Environmental Protection's National Air Quality Standards, which were recently updated. So I'd love to see kind of a modernization of Chapter 66 air pollution around particulate matter, specifically PM 2.5. I think that would go a long way of actually, right, the council and the city does have the duty and the right to protect citizens from air pollution and particulate matter. I mean, as more research comes out, the more I think we'll find, and we have found that it's particularly harmful to human health. So I think it is a health issue. And then long term, something that we're playing around with is we'd like to see the city of Buffalo become the lead agency on the Skagway Highway and Kensington Expressway project, make it a city project. Very similar to the city of Rochester. So I think Buffalonians would like to think of the city of Rochester as like, I think we consider it as like a sister or a brother city. I mean, it's our closest city in New York State, very similar to us demographic wise, but they're actually one of the most progressive cities in the country when it comes to highway removals. They've actually removed their inner loop and filled in their tunnel with, I think they took sand from the bottom of Lake Ontario and filled in, which is awesome. So I think we kind of look to the city of Rochester, and the city of Rochester actually being the lead agency for the highway project. Right now, the New York State Department of Transportation is the lead agency on the Kensington Expressway. I think the critique of that is that, the Department of Transportation is focused on one thing, and that's maintaining vehicular capacity. So they never really studied the no-build solution or the filling it in, because their objective is just maintaining vehicular capacity. So we'd like the city of Buffalo to become the lead agency and just do more studies on, weighing maintaining vehicular capacity with the actual health and the humanity of the residents that live there. So that's kind of one of the more long-term things, but we really want to make this a city issue. And I think the East Side Parkways, we're coalition, we're trying to make it so anyone running for mayor in 2025 for the city will, one, have to have a position on the Kensington Expressway. You won't be able to remain silent on the issue. And then we'd love to make it so that if you want to actually win the mayor's race, you have to be for the full restoration of the Humboldt Highway. So I think a couple of ways, yeah. So we're trying to make it a city issue, especially as the mayor's race is just, I think politically there's a lot of momentum of actually we could change the direction of our ship, especially after coming off the longest serving mayor in New York's in the city of Buffalo history. So yeah, drop a comment in the comments, questions. Yeah, and I'll be speaking more, but I'd love to get feedback from people of, what you liked about my presentation, what maybe you didn't, what you'd like to see me cover or explain more, and vice versa. There's more I wasn't able to cover, but I tried to do the best I could in an hour. So that is Metachewy's Kensington Address. Okay, so I got about 5 minutes here, so I wanted to kind of do recording, and yeah, we have some comments from Nick's World and Brendan Stew. So saying how's it going. Thank you to my viewers for tuning in. Thank you for John will be back and we'll talk about maybe Sagwa, and then Brandon, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you tuning in. Didn't jump to your comments because I wanted to do an uninterrupted address on the Kensington Expressway, but we appreciate you tuning in, and drop a comment or question if you have comments or questions. But a couple of things I wanted to talk on. So one, I wanted to talk about the bit license. So abolish the bit license. So what do I mean by that? So the bit license is New York State's regulations around cryptocurrency. So New York State, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, New York State is on par with North Korea when it comes to crypto. I think actually North Korea might be more progressive when it comes to crypto, but New York State is one of the most oppressive regimes in all of planet Earth when it comes to crypto. And that's specifically due to the bit license. So the bit license was developed, I think it was around 2014 or 2015. So right as Bitcoin and cryptocurrency were kind of, emerging, New York State adopted one of the most restrictive regulations in not just the country, but actually the world. I mean, I'm not joking. When you go onto lots of crypto sites, they'll usually say, like, we don't service customers in Eastern Ukraine, North Korea, Iran, and New York State. So New York State is particularly singled out among American residents. So, and these were kind of adopted because, right, New York, it's the financial capital of the world, right? It's the home of Wall Street. So the bit license, I don't think was adopted with all New York State residents in mind. Is really just to maintain really the financial center, right? To protect Wall Street. And the closer you are to kind of New York State's Albany to New York City like power pipeline, the farther you are from that, the more you don't get the benefit. So I think the bit license particularly harms upstate residents. So residents of the city of Buffalo, Utica, whether you're an apple farmer in the North Country, an apple farmer in the North Country, the further you are from the Albany, New York City Wall Street power center, the more you are harmed by the bit license. So the bit license makes it extremely hard to operate a cryptocurrency business in New York State. So actually, you've had lots of crypto businesses vacate New York State and set up shop in other places of the country that are more friendly to crypto, and really other places of the world. And I think that's one of the reasons I'd love to see New York State abolish the bit license. Of one, it's driving right the most innovative sector on planet Earth, one of the most innovative. It's driving innovation out of the state, all to protect, Wall Street and kind of the legacy banking system, which is great if you're on Wall Street. And I get why, you in favor of the bit license, but as someone that lives in Buffalo, lives in upstate New York, the bit license is particularly harmful to upstate residents. And really, New York has kind of adopted the position of they're proud of the fact that they are the most restrictive and they have the most regulations on crypto. And I just think it's such a backwards way of thinking, especially, right, this is an open source movement. This is an internet movement of kind of like whack-a-mole. Okay, if you shut us down in New York State, we're just going to move across to a different border to entities. And I think places like Wyoming, Texas, Miami is one example. Not alone to say other places in the world that are like, see how this is the future and are encouraging crypto adoption, not clamping it down. So that's a little bit about the bit license that I'll dive deeper into, but I just want to say, yeah, abolish the bit license. And I got about a minute left here, so I also wanted to talk on something recently as a Buffalo Bills fan. So this last week we had the Bills lose their second game in a row, which, as a fan, yeah, it's not good. We didn't like it. They looked bad. But I wanted to address something more concerning, which I think was specifically, Josh Allen and what appeared to be a severe concussion, right? I think he took a hit where he threw the ball and his head slammed against the concrete, and it appeared to my eyes and many others that he went unconscious on the field. And he lost movement and it didn't look good. And then the NFL has a concussion protocol, so he was brought into a tent and then came out later after the Bills had a turnover and were close to scoring a touchdown. He came out of the tent. A Buffalo Bills trainer appeared to offer him some smelling salts, and he ran back on the field and continued the game. And I think it's just concerning. I think right with the quarterback of the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa had some bad concussions, and the NFL does have a concussion protocol which doesn't seem to function really well. It seems that the NFL isn't serious about head concussions. I want to say a guy like Josh Allen, right? He plays football violently, right? And he's a warrior. He's tough as nails, and he cares about winning, and that's why we fans love him. But I think somebody from the NFL and from the medical needs to look out for Josh Allen and players like him. And yeah, it's a week 4 game in the regular season. Who cares? I mean, us as Bills fans, as Buffalonians, as human beings, Josh Allen and players, their long-term health is more important than any football game. I'd love to see the NFL take concussions more seriously. So thanks for tuning in. That's the end of my show. And until next time, next week I'll be back with John for Small Talk. And until next time, thanks for tuning in, and fade to blackness. Okay, bye.